In the name of God, who creates, redeems, and sustains all life. As you go, proclaim the good news. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Cure the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. The central message of Jesus is this: the kingdom of heaven has come near. In one of the small group mealtime meetups we've been offering over Zoom this week, and that we'll continue offering for the rest of the month, one of the attendees remarked that she had gone to churches in the past where they were really involved with serving the community, but they had to go somewhere else to do it. And she said, one of the things I really love about Trinity is that we serve people right here at our church. That is also one of the things that first drew me in as I began my process of discernment about being your priest. I found my way to the Episcopal Church many years ago during my first year of college as part of my rediscovery of faith. I'd grown up in another Christian tradition that did not speak to me, and I was intrigued by what I found in the Episcopal Church: traditional, liturgical worship with a forward-looking outlook about the Bible, theology, and social issues. And another thing I really admired about the Episcopal parish across from my university was that it served breakfast Monday through Friday to those in need of a meal. Now, this is not a story about how I discovered my vocation as a faithful volunteer on the way station breakfast serving line. I'll be honest, I was not a frequent volunteer with that ministry. It was, after all, an early morning commitment, and I was a student who all too often stayed up late or all night after procrastinating on a paper that was due the next day. But I was very proud that my church offered this program, and I was always glad when I woke up early and headed over to serve. I still remember stirring the huge pot of grits and the head volunteer chef saying, "We don't skimp on the butter or the cheese. This is, after all, comfort food." Comfort food. Comfort. Bishop Barbara Harris, the first woman consecrated as a bishop in the Anglican Communion, often gave a final benediction at services in which she spoke of our duty to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. She and others who famously used these words, including William Sloane Coffin, drew their inspiration from the journalist Finley Peter Dunn, who wrote for the Chicago Evening Post in the late 19th and early 20th century. He wrote that the job of the newspaper is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. A journalist does this by telling the truth. We too, as Christians, do this by telling the truth. And the truth is that God is love, unconditional love. But unconditional love does not mean that God's love is cheap grace, in the words of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Indeed, God's love transforms us. God's love is a verb calling us to action. When we experience God's love, we cannot just stay where we are forever and bask in the wonderful feeling of it. That's why Jesus rebuked his disciples when they wanted to stay on the mountaintop after the transfiguration. We cannot stay where we are forever. God's love compels us to go out into the world and share that love. There's a song that my friends Cheryl and Laurel taught me during the 4 years we planned and led together Grace Church School's early childhood chapel. The song is called Magic Penny, and maybe you know it. I'm not a good singer, so I'm just going to tell you the words of the chorus. Love is something, if you give it away, give it away, give it away. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. Love is meant to be shared. And that's part of the story of how I ended up here as your priest. Because I felt called to this place where love is shared so freely and so warmly. I felt it all through my interviews and my weekend visit back in February. But one of the strongest moments I felt it was sitting down and eating a meal at Saturday Soup with guests and members of the discernment committee and the vestry. Nothing particularly remarkable happened, but as I sat and enjoyed that lovingly prepared, nutritious, and comforting meal, I talked with the guests at the lunch and parishioners, and I looked around the gym full of people transformed into a dining hall, and I truly felt that this was a glimpse of the kingdom of heaven. By that, I do not mean the reality of poverty and the need for that full room of people to come for a free meal. That's not the kingdom. It's the opposite. But the love in that space, that was the kingdom. The love of volunteers, the love of the parish of Trinity Church, the love of the founder of Saturday Soup, Linda Herdeen, who passed away this week and whose life we give thanks for today. But not just the love of volunteers and the host parish. Yes, the love of the guests too. Their desire for community as well as nourishment. Love was in that place. Love in action. And I wanted to be part of it. I was part of it for that hour, but I wanted to be part of it for years to come. The kingdom of heaven has come near. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. In today's reading from Genesis, Abraham demonstrates love in action. 3 men appear at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. And what does he do? He ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." Abraham offered them refreshment, shade, rest, water, and food. He offered them comfort, and he became their servant. This is the biblical model of hospitality. The host, no matter how high or low in social status, becomes a servant for her or his guests. In the Gospels, Jesus takes it even further and washes the feet of his disciples and says, "Now, do this for one another. Love one another." This is a tender scene at the Last Supper, full of emotion, but it is an extension of a hospitality model that was about life and death for the people of Israel and other communities in that time and place. Abraham did not offer comfort to his guests just because he was a nice guy who liked helping others. He did it because hospitality was truly life or death. Travelers passing by needed shade and water. Without widespread systems of running water, you never knew when you would come across water again on a long journey. Love in action is not just about sentiment. It's about how we live together. It's about giving life to one another. We may not always see the fruits of our labor. When we plant seeds of love, we have to have faith that they will eventually grow into shady trees and beautiful flowers and nourishing crops. But in the story of Abraham, he saw the very tangible fruit of his hospitality. After they rested and ate, one of the travelers said to Abraham, "I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." Now, God had promised Abraham that he would be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. God had promised to Sarah that she would give rise to nations and that kings of peoples would come from her. But they were both very advanced in years, and so it seemed like it would never happen. But after this incident, it did. And they named their son Isaac, which means he laughs, because after Sarah had laughed in disbelief, when she heard she would have a child in her old age, God turned that laughter into joy. Love is something, if you give it away, you end up having more. I'm not saying that we're always going to receive blessings like Abraham and Sarah did when they offered hospitality to strangers, but love in action is a gift for both the recipient and the giver. Love is its own reward, and you never know who you might be serving when you share love in action. After all, in the story of Abraham, Sarah, and the three visitors, we read that the Lord appeared to Abraham as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw three men standing near him. It's thought by many that these three visitors are a manifestation of God. The Lord appeared to Abraham, and he looked up and saw these three men standing near him. We never know when we're entertaining angels unaware. We never know when we might have the opportunity to be servants of God. When we serve one another, we are serving God. And that is the kingdom of heaven, giving love away and then having more. When we share love with one another, we share it with God. And since God is love, God will always be there with more love to give back to us. Love is something, when you give it away, you end up having more. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Gospel, after all, means good news. And what better news could there be that when we give love away, we end up having more? The kingdom of heaven has come near. Amen.